presentation from the Sustainability Advisory Board Annual Report.
City Manager.
Thank you. We're here to hear tonight the presentation regarding Sustainability Annual Report. I've been involved in sustainability issues back when I was in Mason City, so I was excited to see that there was a board that was here prepared and is working on these things. So I'm anxious to have you hear the information that they've provided to me, and so welcome aboard.
Good evening. My name is Derek Carpenter, and I'm a member of the Sustainability Advisory Board for the City of Topeka. I want to thank the governing body, the council, and manager and his staff for giving us an opportunity to present the 2018 Sustainability Advisory Report to the council. So all of you have a copy of the 2018 report. It's about 4 pages. You'll find some common things that were presented last year, but also some new things. One of the things that we wanted to do was to not just rehash what you've experienced before, but to try something a little different. And so what we've created is essentially a dashboard, and it's modeled a little bit out of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, except in this case, it's actually the city of Topeka's needs. You start with, at the top, the very basic things, water, food, and move all the way down to things that are a bit more esoteric, that enter into the quality of life and what makes a place like Topeka a place where people want to live and work. So what we've developed is, under these topics, basically a traffic light type of approach, with green for things that are going well, making progress, next steps ready to be taken, yellow things that perhaps need a little more attention, and red things that don't seem to be getting any focus. So with that, we'll get started and head down through. Focusing first on the things that are green that we should really be proud of. One of them is that we're now being compliant with the EPA standards for safe drinking water. That's huge, and I would tell you that it certainly is great that the city has achieved that level of cleanliness for the drinking water. I would tell you, though, that the EPA guidelines associated with that are kind of a basic meets minimum requirements. And so what we're asking the City Council to do is to take a look at new and more efficient methods of water treatment and filtration that will help with things that could later become long-term health issues. Like we're talking about complex compounds that are found in pharmaceuticals, runoff from farming operations and the chemicals that are used there. Things even as simple as plastic microbeads, which most people aren't even aware of, but are actually in many cleaning agents that are used in household and industrial use. And they're such fine, small pieces of plastic that they can't even be filtered by the technology that's currently in use. So as you move forward and consider down the road what's going to happen with delivering safe drinking water to the city, we hope that you'll take a look at more aggressive and improved methods of filtration and treatment that will help safeguard the citizens from these kinds of potential health hazards down the road. The wastewater compliance is truly causes everybody a sigh of relief, because we were able to get back into compliance without having to do a lot of remediation, digging up sewers, et cetera. And so we think that's a great thing. I'm sure that the folks downstream from us appreciate it quite a bit as well. And so as we go down through, want to touch also on community gardens, which you all have done a great job in supporting, and we certainly think that it's a value to the community to have those kinds of neighborhood organizations get together, put in gardens, and help actually provide access to fruits and vegetables that they may have difficulty getting access to. That's particularly important for low-income families. So we appreciate your support for that. As far as energy use, as you know, back in 2010, the City Council set up a goal for the city to reduce its energy usage by 10% by 2020. And the prior administration didn't have a lot of focus on that, and we're very pleased that the new city manager has taken steps to figure out kind of the baseline where we are now, so that then we can determine what the gap is between where we are and the 2020 goals that you all had set out for us. The next one is single stream recycling, which, although it's not something that the city owns or operates, this is something that is a real differentiator in our minds, because there's a lot of communities who would love to have single stream and just don't. And so the fact that we've got it is a big feather in our cap, and I think it's one of the many things that we have to be proud of here in the city. Complete Streets, and I'll also throw in the Bike Pathways program, are excellent. I've been tangentially involved in some of the workings of that, and I can tell you that there's a lot of dedicated folks who are putting these plans together, and I think we're already seeing a lot of beneficial results from those efforts. The street maintenance plan that Jason Peak and his team have put together is really important, because not only did it take a comprehensive look at all of the condition of the streets that we currently have, but is using some science and technology to figure out what's the most effective way to, over time, bring the condition of those streets up to a much better level and do it in the most economical way possible. We feel like that's a great plus as well, and so does anybody who's driven the streets in our city lately. The forestry plan is another essential thing that we think is going to be a great win for the city of Topeka. And the current piece that's being worked on is a complete comprehensive inventory of the population, the tree population of our urban forest. You have to know what's there in order to develop a plan. And as we've mentioned to you before, we're taking out something on the order of 600 to 800 trees a year and replacing very few of them. And so having a forestry plan that focuses not just on where to plant, but what to plant, so that we end up with a diverse urban forest that can withstand things like Dutch elm disease in the old days, emerald ash borer beetle, those kinds of things. Having that diversity will really help us maintain and have a robust urban environment. And that's very important, because not only are they aesthetically pleasing, they provide living space for plants and animals, and they're also help keep the city cooler, help prolong street life, and there's a lot of good reasons why we should pay attention to having a strong urban forest. So those are the positive things that I think, from our perspective, the city has a lot to be proud of. And we'll turn now to some things that could use some additional focus. One of them, even as good as community gardens are, they help from maybe May through September, October. And then we think of a place like 10th and Lane that used to have a Dillon's and doesn't now. There are other places like that that are underserved by grocery stores. We're asking the city council to perhaps think outside the box and try and figure out if there are ways that we can develop partnerships, either with private or public entities, that can help provide food to these underserved areas. So we think that's something that's really worth considering. In the past, the city of Topeka has had, in fact, an award-winning, Energy Star award-winning affordable housing program. And in the prior administration, there wasn't a lot of focus placed on that. But I think tonight you're going to hear another presentation perhaps that deals with the affordable housing issue, and hoping that you will all consider having a robust affordable housing program is a critical element for the city of Topeka. As it relates to the development of that baseline, to know where we are now in terms of our energy usage, we need that in order to have an energy plan that the city can figure out what that gap is between where we are currently and the 2020 goals that you all set out. And so not only developing that plan, but also making sure that when it comes to new city buildings that are being planned or renovations that are being planned, that energy efficiency be brought in on the front end of the process so that we don't end up having the plan complete and the budget set, and then all of a sudden we figured out that really wasn't, the focus up front should have been on making this as energy efficient as possible, because most of the buildings that the city owns have been around for a long time. And so operating costs, what it takes to keep that going after it's built, should be as much of a concern as the upfront costs. So we're hoping that the city council can make sure that that focus is placed at the front end of that process. Waste to waterway is kind of an interesting topic because not many people think of the city of Topeka as a coastal city, but it is. And the reason it is because, in fact, the whole state of Kansas is one huge watershed. Everything that's not permanently affixed to the ground ends up dispersed by the rain and into waterways of some type, whether it's creeks, lakes, rivers. And so it's really important to understand that what happens in Kansas doesn't just stay in Kansas, because if it gets into the Shunga, gets into Soldier Creek, ends up in the Kansas River, goes to the Missouri, goes to the Mississippi, and then enters the Gulf, Louisiana State University estimates that 90% of the debris that leaves the Mississippi and goes into the Gulf is plastic. It's an amazing amount of debris that's entering our world's oceans, and like the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, every major ocean now has what's called a trash vortex. It's a debris field that's full of floating debris. And in the case of the Pacific Ocean, it's now twice the size of Texas. If you've driven across Texas, you know that that's enormous. They're estimating there's 1.7 trillion pieces of trash in the Pacific Ocean, and the bulk of that is plastic. So what happens in Kansas doesn't stay in Kansas. You just have to walk down the Shunga Creek and you can tell that plastic that's been inadvertently put into the storm sewer or left as trash ends up in our waterways. We're asking the city council to take what I believe is probably going to be a big ask, that you consider banning plastic grocery bags and plastic straws. Other communities, particularly communities on the coast, are already considering this. So we're going to ask that you give that some consideration as well. In green space, we would like for the city council to ensure that projects that the city takes on have included in them the inclusion of native plants. They're so important to the Kansas ecosystem, and oftentimes when we've talked to folks like city engineers, et cetera, about inclusion of native plants into projects, it's again, comes too late in the process and the budget's set and there's nothing left. Our take on it is, if we take and consider that up front, we can make it part of the budget and have it included, and be better off for having those pieces of the ecosystem involved with our city projects. Public education, if you can see a stream of thinking along here, is really twofold. One of them is we as Topekans have a lot to be thankful for and appreciate. The things that you see in green are terrific. A lot of Topekans don't know about this. There are ambassadors to the rest of the world. Everybody that they touch, they have an opportunity to tell you how great Topeka is. They've got to have ammunition to tell those folks that story. We would like to work with the City Public Relations Department and Media Department to come up with a comprehensive way to get information like this out. And we'd be delighted to work with Molly to try and put that together. The other thing is, I would say probably every Topekan would like to help in some way, whether it's with recycling, whatever the case might be, but some of them just don't know the difference between styrofoam and something that's recyclable. And having education to help them do better, in the end, helps us all be better stewards of our space. So we would like to include not just the attributes, the things that we have that are great and we should be proud of, but also provide some education on how to tell what's recyclable, what's not. Where should I dispose of unused medications? And a variety of things that would all help us be better stewards of our environment. The last thing that we've got, and I know this is always a touchy subject because my sense has been that there's a fairly strong builder lobby that isn't necessarily interested in the city adopting the International Energy Conservation Code. And I know the argument is, well, it's going to raise the cost for building a home. And I get that, but I don't think that's a strong argument. And the reason is because if the city adopts it, then every builder is going to have to adhere to whatever that level of code is that the city adopts, which means that every builder has the same advantage or disadvantage, if you would care to look at it that way, of having to comply. And so the fact that Builder A is concerned that his residential projects are going to cost more money isn't at a competitive disadvantage against Builder B, who has to adhere to the same goal. And I think if I were a builder, that I would think that having a highly energy efficient home would actually be more of a selling point, because it means that whoever owns that home isn't going to have to spend as much in terms of utilities, and neither is the next person who buys that home. So it should have a lot of appeal to the homeowner. So I think it's worth considering, and I know it's not something that's happened in the past, but certainly would appreciate your willingness to do that. In closing, I wanted to say a couple of things. One of them is we've perennially asked you for at least a half-time person to be a sustainability coordinator. And I got the question this evening, well, is that going to save us money? I think it is, but that doesn't help much, I don't think, in the justification of that. And so what I would tell you is that I would be willing to put together a business case that would quantify the benefits associated with having a sustainability coordinator, which we think is important because you see all the things in yellow and red, and getting the word out about those, putting focus on those, and then being a proponent of all of the things in green is something that somebody in that position could readily help with. So there are benefits, soft costs, I would say, but definitely benefits. But I would be willing to help put together a business case to see what we can justify, because even a part-time person would be a big help. And then finally, I would say that I bet almost every person that lives in Topeka would like Topeka to be a better place to live and work. There's a lot of us, particularly on the Sustainability Advisory Board, who are willing to work to make that happen. What we need is some leadership. You've already shown that you have that capability because there's a lot of green going on already. We just need some more, and we're hoping that you all can provide that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate the things that you just brought to our attention, and I'm excited to see all the things that we do have in green. I do know that just like everybody in the nation, we're taking a look at what we're doing and how we could be more efficient and how we can reduce emissions and do better for our community. I think it was like a week ago, I received an email asking me if I would support banning plastic bags and plastic straws, and I said, absolutely. Absolutely. I said, the thing is that I'm not the one that unilaterally makes a decision, but if the council would be agreeable to this, I think that it would be a great thing for our community to do, because it is true. And most of the retail operations that utilize this type of bags already have, because there's pressures on the coast for them to change what they're using. They already have that stuff, so we're not the ones breaking through with the technology. The council, I know that Councilwoman Clear has a question.
Actually, you answered an important question for me. In National Geographic this month, they have a wonderful article on plastic, and that there's 9 million tons of it each year that end up in the ocean. So when I went for my straw this morning, I went, now how am I contributing to anything? I don't put the straw in the ocean because I don't live by the ocean, and I don't litter. But as you said, I thought, how can anybody in Kansas affect that? And you answered that question, because it goes whoop right down there.
What happens in Kansas doesn't stay in Kansas.
No, so I am with you on eliminating those.
Awesome. Deputy Mayor.
So, quick comment and then a couple of questions. I wonder what the folks in Las Vegas think about that. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's a joke, people. Come on. So, a couple of questions. First of all, I really like this new format. It's very informative. It's an excellent way of doing a quick, high-level overview to see where we stand. And in fact, it looks like we stand pretty well, just as it sits, which is, an excellent testament to the work we've already done. My concern on part of this is a lot of these things the city doesn't have direct control over, so it's a whole lot of, when we lost the Huntoon Dillons, there was a substantial outreach by a number of levels of the government to try and work with the private sector to save that, and it was not successful. Yeah. So, my fear is we're setting somebody up for failure if we're, intend to put somebody and then their sole job is to try and attract grocery stores to come in and build things in these places without providing heavy subsidies to get them to do so. And that's a substantial budget that we don't have. So my fear is that with some of these, the subsidies required to make the private sector get to do what we want are simply unsustainable. My other comment is on the residential building codes, it's not competing in the city. We're competing with the county, and we're already at a significant disadvantage. So I would recommend lobbying the county for those building codes. That would truly level the playing field with building in the city and the county. And as you know, most of the development going on right now is not in the city of Topeka. And I've argued that that's a huge problem with our community. We need to be out there hustling for those building permits within the city limits as it sits now, and currently they're not. The numbers just don't support that. So I'd be interested to see what you all's take is on that. And I would very much like to see the business case. I'm all for investing where it makes sense to save money. In looking the areas where that particular person would be responsible for, I don't immediately see it, but I'm absolutely open to having my mind changed with good solid information. So I very much appreciate seeing that if you guys are willing to put the effort into doing that.
Well, I appreciate your open-mindedness, and we will work on putting that together.
The only other comment I have is, I think right away we could do something with native plants. That's an easy directive to put to the folks that are writing RFPs. So, easy things to change. Other than that, excellent work. Thank you for the report.
Thank you very much for your time.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I really support pretty much everything my colleagues have said. I think it's exciting to see that you all have weathered a time when some folks were not as interested in sustainability. The sustainability to me just makes sense. But sometimes the business case does need to be made for it. When we were talking about updating the international building codes that we use here, we did talk about that energy conservation code as well. And there was some, let's just say, mixed conversation about that. But if you could help us with the business case for why that works. I do know that I appreciate your out-of-the-box thoughts as well as those from the body, in that I was talking with someone not long ago who's been involved in a campaign about getting rid of plastic bags and straws, and that person was telling me that, to her surprise, when they started to build their coalition, the folks from the grocery industry showed up and said they were fine with getting rid of them too. And people didn't expect that. So sometimes when we think something's sort of unusual, we didn't ask. And so those kinds of stories hearten me as well. Just have one wrap-up question. We all got some emails from members of the group or supporters of sustainability, and those emails made reference to existing 2020 goals.
Yes.
In an energy efficiency and conservation plan. Is that the Vermont Energy Study from 2010, or is it something different?
It was based on that, yes.
Okay. I guess I don't know if you've got a specific answer, but I remember the Vermont Energy Study, and it was sort of split in half. It was right after I came on council, and it was pretty comprehensive, and it was split into 2 tracks, and it included very measurable metrics for within the city, and then a corresponding set for the community at large of things that we could do to improve sustainability.
Right.
And it actually measuring and tracking those metrics fizzled after a few years, but I wondered if that was the plan and whether you thought we should simply move on with more of a chart like what you shared with us today, or whether we should be going back to that.
Well, and I won't speak for
I'll talk too, but go ahead.
that I think it's important to understand where we are now and then compare that with what the 2020 goals set out and see if it's realistic for us to achieve that in the 18 months that are, 18 months depending on how you count. Because you hate to let a goal go away if you can attain it. But having said that, even if we are able to attain that goal, we've got to step back and take a look further down the road and make sure that we're setting the next goal. So either way, progress is really what we're looking for. And so Mr. Manager has some thoughts on that topic as well.
City Manager.
I don't want to stifle conversation here. I've made some notes, and Derek and I met and talked about some of these things, and obviously there's usually a conflict with my attending their meeting each time, but have been a couple of times. And as we look at these things, a couple of comments that I want to make on each of their, or not on each of their items, but some of their items. You know, we're already in the process of studying how to make our water taste better. That's being reviewed right now. We're looking at activated carbon and other opportunities that exist on processes that can be used to make our water taste and smell better. So all of those things are being done, and I think there will be some solutions in the near future, and then we'll also continue to study whether that continues on with potentially doing the ozone process. With wastewater, I think we're doing a very good job of handling our wastewater end products, and we're working on our methane gas capture project, which in the end will also help us with our sustainability, taking a product that we currently burn off and actually producing some funding from it. So I think those are good things. I've talked to Planning Director Finder, and we actually are going to have the Building and Fire Appeals Board is going to be looking at the IECC to determine whether it's something that we want to adopt completely, in part, or not at all. So that is going to be reviewed as an option and see what makes sense for our community. Some of those rules and regulations are worth applying and can in the long run make houses affordable with the reduction in energy costs. As we look at affordable housing, that is coming next week, and so we'll be discussing what we're doing there. I had, prior to departure of our last year's interns, they did do a review of some of the information related to how we're doing at accomplishing the energy goals that were established for us to complete by 2020. And we're doing okay. We're still waiting for some final data back from Westar on a few of our accounts to determine what our actual usages were, and we'll be getting re-energized to finish off that analysis. But if you look at it, we have, with regards to the new buildings, as we look at the renovation of City Hall, we're clearly looking at great opportunities for us to institute some changes relative to energy efficiency. I know that Dr. Peak has done some of the buildings already. Other buildings within the city's infrastructure are buildings we own, making them more energy efficient, better lighting that's more energy efficient. So we are making some changes there and making some progress. The waste to waterway, I can tell you that the last Earth Day, a number of utilities staff members went out and cleaned a number of our waterways and got rid of some of the materials that you have. And then there have been others that have been called into us that relative to our waterways in this community that have trash in them, and they've gone and worked either with the inmate crews or with the utility staff to clean them up. So we are making some progress there. And so I think as we look at some of these things, we're really actually starting to address them. I think that, sure, some of them probably are yellow because we're not fully developed with what we're doing. But I hope that we can show some progress in the future that they can come back and say, in their opinion, they think we're green. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
City Manager, and I'm going to address you because I don't know who to address, but I know before we've gotten a report on the efficiencies of the lights when you come in. I don't know what they call it. When you come in, they automatically go on and off. And I seen you here one Friday night, and you're going through the hallway, and you're turning off all these lights. and I say that in sincerity. I mean, they cost money when they're on. And I know we got a report at one time, and I know it was a budget issue. Where are we at on that? Because that's probably been a couple of years.
A lot of that has to do with the fact that we're in the middle of doing a renovation, and so to add something now and then take it out right when we do the renovation is probably not a good investment. But many of those types of energy efficiency things are being planned for the renovation, and it will make a difference.
So when you talk about the efficiencies, that's part of that plan, is what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy.
Deputy Mayor?
So one quick follow-up question, Mr. City Manager. So I'm looking at our website here, and indeed, there is nothing about our sustainability efforts on the webpage that I can easily find. And I think you're absolutely right that public education is a big part of showing what the community is doing and doing well, and where citizens can help. What does it take to pair everybody up and get that done? Is that something we can do pretty easily?
I think so.
Okay.
I believe so.
I think that's an excellent, again, that's probably not a significant investment in capital to do so, and
Right.
we're doing fairly well according to the report, so I think that's an excellent way of starting the public education component that I do agree needs work.
Absolutely. And if I could have one closing remark. Many of us on the Sustainability Advisory Board, prior to last year, or even as late as last year, were really questioning the value that we brought in meeting to discuss these topics, because we didn't feel like it was resonating with the administration. And the turnaround has been like night and day. And so thankful that we have a city manager who takes this seriously and has immersed himself in the city of Topeka to understand what the needs are, and has already made more progress on these things than the prior administration during the whole time that they were in place. And so thank you all for the perseverance that it took to go through that process, which I know was much longer than you wanted, to make sure that we got a good person in this position. and you did a hell of a job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.